Margaret, I need you to come to the bank. There's something your husband left. Please don't mention this to your daughter. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, still wearing the black dress I'd worn to my husband's burial 2 days before. The voice on the other end belonged to Franklin Reed, the man who had managed our finances for 22 years. I had known Franklin longer than I had known most of my neighbors. He was the kind of man who sent handwritten Christmas cards and remembered the names of your grandchildren. So when he told me not to say a word to my daughter, I didn't ask why. I simply said I would be there at 10. For 38 years, I was married to Gerald Whitmore. He was a civil engineer who built bridges for a living and kept his word like it was the only currency that mattered. We raised 2 children in a 4-bedroom house in Asheville, North Carolina, a house Gerald and I had picked out together on a rainy Saturday in 1987. We painted every room ourselves. We planted the dogwood tree in the front yard the spring our son Daniel was born. That house was not just a structure, it was the proof of everything we had built together. Gerald passed on a Tuesday in October. A stroke, swift and without warning. One moment, he was reading the newspaper at the kitchen table, and the next, he was gone. The doctor said he likely felt nothing. I have held on to that sentence every single day since. The weeks that followed were the loneliest of my life. Our son Daniel lived in Portland and called when he could. But my daughter Renee lived only 20 minutes away, and she came every day. At first, I was grateful. Renee had always been the organized one, the one who made lists and followed through. After Gerald died, she took over the paperwork, the phone calls, the insurance forms. I let her, because grief had made me slow and the words on those documents blurred every time I tried to read them. I should have paid closer attention. It started small. Renee began coming by without calling first. I would find her in Gerald's office, going through the filing cabinet, saying she was just trying to help me stay organized. Her husband, a man named Todd who had never once looked me in the eye for the full duration of a conversation, started showing up with her. He would walk through the house slowly, the way people do when they are measuring things. One evening in November, about 6 weeks after the funeral, Renee sat me down at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad in front of her. She said she and Todd had been thinking. She said the house was too big for one person. She said the stairs were a liability. She said there was a very nice assisted living community in Hendersonville, only 35 minutes away, and that she had already taken a tour. I told her I was 67 years old and perfectly capable of climbing stairs. She said I was being emotional. That was the first time I heard that word used against me. I would hear it many more times over the next few weeks. Every time I pushed back on something, the suggestion that I hand over my financial passwords, the mention of putting the house on the market, the idea that Todd could manage the estate sale, Renee would look at me with that careful, patient expression and say I was being emotional or overwhelmed, or that grief was affecting my judgment. I started to wonder if she was right. That is the most insidious thing about being told repeatedly that your perception is wrong. You begin to doubt the very instrument you use to perceive. I would lie awake at night and think, maybe I am not thinking clearly. Maybe I do need help. Maybe the house is too big. Gerald had always been the one to balance the checkbook and handle the investments. Without him, I felt like I was standing in a room where someone had moved all the furniture 2 inches to the left. Everything looked familiar, but nothing felt right. In December, Renee presented me with a document. She said it was a simple power of attorney, just so she could help manage things while I was still getting back on my feet. Todd sat across the table looking at his phone while she explained it. I asked if I should have a lawyer look at it first. Renee sighed and said I was making things unnecessarily complicated. She said she was just trying to help. She said it hurt her that I didn't trust her. I signed it. I have thought about that moment many times since. I was 67 years old. I had buried my husband 10 weeks before, and I signed a document without reading it because my daughter made me feel guilty for asking a reasonable question. I am not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me. I am telling you this so that if you ever find yourself in a room like that one, you will recognize it. The call from Franklin came on a Thursday morning in late January, 3.5 months after Gerald died. I wrote down the time of the appointment on the notepad by the phone, the way Gerald always did. And then I stood there for a moment, thinking about what Franklin had said. Don't mention this to your daughter. I did not mention it to my daughter. The First National Bank of Asheville was on Lexington Avenue, a building with wide stone steps and brass door handles that Gerald had always said looked like they belonged on a courthouse. Franklin's office was on the second floor. His assistant, a young woman named Priya, brought me coffee without being asked, and I thought that was a kind thing to do. Franklin Reed was in his late 60s, a careful and deliberate man with silver hair and reading glasses. He was always setting down and picking back up. He had been a friend of Gerald's long before he became our financial advisor. They had been in the same Rotary Club for 15 years. When he came around his desk to shake my hand, I could see that he had not been sleeping well either. "Margaret," he said, "thank you for coming on short notice." He sat back down and folded his hands on the desk. He did not pick up his reading glasses. "Before I explain why I called you," he said, "I need to tell you something Gerald told me. He told me this past summer in July when he came in to update some documents. He said that he had a feeling Renee and Todd were in financial trouble. He didn't have proof, he said, but he knew his daughter. He asked me to keep a close eye on the accounts and to contact you directly if I ever saw anything unusual. He was very specific about the directly part." I set my coffee cup down. Franklin opened a folder on his desk and turned it so I could see. He walked me through it quietly and without drama, the way a doctor delivers news they wish they did not have to deliver. Over the course of 11 weeks, beginning the Monday after Gerald's funeral, a series of transfers had been made from our joint savings account. Each transfer was just under $10,000, an amount Franklin explained was likely chosen to avoid automatic bank alerts. There were 9 transfers in total. The power of attorney document I had signed gave Renee legal authority to act on my behalf for financial matters. $83,000. I looked at the numbers on that page for a long time. I looked at the dates. I looked at the account the money had been transferred to, which Franklin told me was a joint account belonging to Renee and Todd. I thought about Todd walking through my house slowly, measuring things with his eyes. I thought about the assisted living brochure Renee had left on my kitchen counter. I thought about every time she had told me I was being emotional. "How did Gerald know?" I asked. Franklin said Gerald hadn't known for certain. He had noticed that Todd's contracting business had gone quiet, that Renee had stopped mentioning their vacation plans, that there had been some tension at Christmas the year before. Gerald was a quiet observer. He didn't say much, but he noticed things. "And he loved you," Franklin said. "He wanted to make sure you were protected even in a situation he hoped would never come." I thought about my husband reading the newspaper at the kitchen table. I thought about him driving to this office on a summer afternoon and sitting in this same chair and thinking about how to protect me from something he was afraid might happen after he was gone. I had to press my lips together and look at the window for a moment. Franklin slid another document across the desk. "Gerald also updated his will in July," he said. "The house is yours outright, no conditions." He added a clause that specifically prevents any transfer of the property without your direct written consent, witnessed by 2 parties unrelated to the family. He was thorough. That was Gerald. Thorough. Franklin asked me how I wanted to proceed. He said that what Renee had done was a criminal matter, that the power of attorney had been misused, that the documentation was clear. He said he had already been in contact with a colleague who specialized in elder financial abuse, and that this colleague was prepared to assist me if I chose to move forward. He said the choice was entirely mine. I asked him to give me a week. I drove home on autopilot, the way you do when your mind is somewhere else entirely. I pulled into the driveway and sat in the car for a few minutes, looking at the dogwood tree. Bare now in January. its branches thin and patient against the gray sky. Gerald had planted that tree. He had carried the sapling from the nursery in the back seat of his car and dug the hole himself on a Saturday morning while I watched from the porch with coffee. That night I called Daniel. I told him everything. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, the particular silence of someone revising everything they thought they knew. Then he said, "Mom, what do you need me to do?" That is the thing about a child who was raised right. You don't have to explain the situation twice. Daniel flew in from Portland on Sunday. He did not call Renee to tell her he was coming. We met with Franklin's colleague, an attorney named Patricia Owens, who had been handling elder financial exploitation cases for over 20 years, and who wore no-nonsense suits and spoke in complete, measured sentences that made you feel like the situation was serious but manageable. She reviewed the documents and told us that the evidence was strong. She filed a complaint with the district attorney's office the following week. In the meantime, I had a conversation with Renee that I had been preparing for since Thursday. She came by on a Wednesday evening, as she often did, carrying a casserole dish and her usual expression of patient concern. I let her in. I poured 2 glasses of water. I sat down across from her at the kitchen table, where she had once laid out her yellow legal pad and explained to me that I was too old for my own house. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I had already done my crying, alone, over the weekend. I told her what I knew. I told her about Franklin's call, about the account statements, about Patricia Owens, about the complaint that had already been filed. I watched her face go through several expressions in rapid succession, like a card shuffling through a deck. Surprise, then calculation, then something that looked briefly like regret before it settled into something harder. She said I was misunderstanding the situation. She said she had been going to pay it back. She said the transfers were temporary, that Todd's business was having a difficult quarter, that she had meant to tell me, that she had been managing things for months and deserved some consideration for all the time she had put in. I said, "You stole from me 3 weeks after I buried your father." She didn't have an answer for that. I asked her to leave. She left the casserole on the counter. I put it in the trash. The legal process took 8 months. I will not walk you through every step of it because the details are tedious and they belong to lawyers and court clerks and people who get paid to care about them. What I will tell you is that Renee was charged with financial elder abuse and misuse of power of attorney. Todd was named as a co-conspirator. They repaid the $83,000 as part of a plea agreement. Renee received 2 years of probation and was required to complete a financial counseling program. Todd's contractor license was suspended. Patricia Owens told me the outcome was better than average. I told her that wasn't saying much. Daniel flew back to Portland in June, but he calls every Sunday now without fail. We talk for an hour sometimes about nothing important, what he cooked that week, what the weather is like in each of our cities, what book I'm reading. Gerald used to say that the quality of a relationship is measured in ordinary moments. I think about that a lot now. I did not move to the assisted living community in Hendersonville. I still live in the house on Montfort Avenue, the one Gerald and I chose together on a rainy Saturday, the one where every room still has the paint we chose ourselves. Last April, the dogwood tree bloomed the way it does every year, white flowers opening up against a blue sky like it has something to prove. I had the locks changed in February. New locks on every door, a new security system, and a new attorney, a woman I found myself, who I pay with my own checkbook. I am 67 years old. I have climbed every stair in this house every single day since. I know my own mind. I know what I see. Gerald knew it too. He knew it well enough to drive to a bank on a summer afternoon and sit across from his oldest friend and say, "Look after her." He knew it well enough to put it in writing. I think about that drive he made. I think about him sitting in the parking lot afterward, maybe the way I sat in my driveway in January, looking at whatever he was looking at, trusting that it would be enough. It was enough. If there is anything I want you to take from this, it is not that your children will betray you. Most of them won't. It is not that you should be suspicious of everyone who tries to help you after a loss. Most people who help you are genuinely trying to help. What I want you to take from this is simpler than that. Read the documents before you sign them. Ask the questions even when someone makes you feel foolish for asking, and if someone tells you that your perception of your own life is wrong, take a breath and trust yourself first. Gerald built bridges his whole career. He used to say that a bridge is only as strong as the foundation you can't see. He wasn't just talking about engineering. I have thought about Franklin's phone call many times. I have thought about the specific way he said, "Please don't mention this to your daughter." There was no drama in it, no accusation, just a quiet warning from a man who had been asked to watch over someone he respected. He did exactly what Gerald asked him to do. I sent him a card in September. I told him that Gerald had been lucky to have a friend like him. I told him I was doing well. Both of those things were true. The dogwood is due to bloom again in a few weeks. I've been watching it from the kitchen window in the mornings with my coffee, the way Gerald used to. The branches are starting to bud, small and closed and full of what's coming. I don't know what this year will bring. I don't know what the year after that will bring either. But I know the doors are locked. I know the documents are in order. I know Daniel's number by heart. And I know that somewhere, in a filing cabinet in a bank on Lexington Avenue, there is a folder with my husband's handwriting on the tab. That is enough to start with. That has always been enough. I have spent a lot of time thinking about the choices that led to that kitchen table, the one where I signed a document I did not read, because my daughter made me feel small for asking a question. I do not say that to excuse what I did. I say it because understanding how something happened is the only way to make sure it does not happen again. There is a cause behind every consequence, and most of the time that cause is quieter than we expect. It is not a single dramatic moment. It is a slow accumulation of small surrenders. Each time I let a decision pass without asking about it, I was making a choice. Each time I accepted the word emotional as a verdict instead of a deflection, I was making a choice. The outcome was not inevitable. It was built piece by piece from moments I could have interrupted. What Gerald understood, and what I have come to understand since, is that protecting yourself is not a cynical act. It is an act of respect for the life you have built, for the people who helped you build it, and for the version of yourself that deserves to keep living in it. He did not hire Franklin, update his will, and make his instructions specific because he was a suspicious man. He did it because he was a wise one. Wisdom is not the absence of trust. It is knowing the difference between trust that has been earned and trust that is simply being assumed. Renee assumed my trust the way some people assume a door is unlocked, not because they have a key, but because they believe no one would think to lock it against them. She was wrong. Gerald had thought of it, and eventually, so did I. The courage it took to sit across from my own daughter and tell her what I knew. I will not pretend that was easy. There is a particular kind of grief in discovering that someone you love has decided your vulnerability is an opportunity. You mourn twice, once for the person you thought they were, and once for the version of the relationship you will never get back. I went through both of those in the days between Franklin's phone call and that Wednesday evening. By the time Renee walked through my door with that casserole dish, the morning was done. What remained was clarity. That clarity was not given to me. I built it slowly, out of hard materials. The account statements in that folder, the memory of Gerald's handwriting on a tab, the sound of Daniel's voice on the phone saying, "What do you need me to do?" It was built from the decision to call Patricia Owens, to change the locks, to sign nothing without reading it first. Small, deliberate acts, one after another, in the direction of a life that belonged to me again. I am 67 years old. I have made mistakes that cost me dearly. I have also made decisions that brought me back to myself. Both things are true, and neither one cancels out the other. What I know now is this: the people who truly love you will never make you feel foolish for asking a question. They will never call your judgment into doubt in order to remove it. And they will never need your signature on something they are unwilling to explain. Trust your instincts. Read the documents. Ask the questions. And when someone you love hands you a pen before you are ready, it is always allowed to put it down.